welcome to a Buy Round podcast special. I'm James Graham, and in this 10-part series, I'll discuss the biggest, most talked about topics around our great game.
Rugby League Roundtable.
Joining me, leading journalist Danny Weidler.
So I thought, oh, that's a bit odd that the boss of the game hadn't heard about it.
Current South Sydney Rabbitohs coach Jason Demetriou.
A powerful try.
Former Premiership winning CEO Shane Richardson.
You've got to make some really unpopular decisions.
And Cronulla Sharks captain Dale Finucane.
And the Sharks are off and running.
Today we touch a topic that has the very future of the game at heart. We're going to be looking at all things concussion.
Rugby League Roundtable.
Today we're going to be taking a deep dive all things concussion. Now, Dale, I'll come to you as a recent player, a current player. You would have seen a lot of change in this space. Can you talk to us about some of those changes that you've experienced?
Yeah, obviously I've experienced a handful of concussions over the course of my career, so familiar with the protocols that are in place, and I guess the change over the course of my career from the start to now. Obviously, one of the biggest changes is the fact that they've got the distance between games. I think it used to be a 6-day return to play protocol if you've got a Category 1 concussion, which means non-return to play to the field, whereas now it's an 11-day non-return to non-play. So that's probably the biggest change, I guess, over the course of my career. And, for the guys that have had multiple concussions over the course of their career or in multiple weeks, they've got some neuropsych testing as well. So I've done some of the neuropsych testing myself in terms of, I think it was within a fortnight having suffered 2 concussions. So it's a bit more of a stringent type test, where it's probably like a 2-hour test, covering off a number of things and like puzzles, games, memory and things like that. So I do think the NRL are doing, good things in terms of looking after player welfare in that space.
On a personal level, do you feel that the culture, the conversation, the attitude in the dressing room is a lot more accepting of players taking time away and admitting to being concussed, and there's a bit more of an awareness of some of the potential dangers and ramifications for continuing on like perhaps we used to?
Yeah, I reckon it's certainly changed, as I said, from when I debuted back in 2012 to now. The perception around, staying on the field and wearing it as a badge of honour to stay on the field, as opposed to now being comfortable going, well, I am symptomatic, I do need to come off. And, particularly our coach, Craig Fitzgibbon, he's a massive advocate for if you're not sound of mind to be able to play, then you shouldn't, or if you're symptomatic. Whereas I can't speak on behalf of all coaches and, all performance staff, but he's probably, with his dealings at the Roosters, having had a number of players there, Boy Cordner obviously retiring, Jake Friend having issues with concussion as well, probably taking that really conservative approach as a club has definitely brought that over to the Sharks.
Yeah, I guess just thinking from my own experience and researching on this, JD, I'll ask you. So you, as players, we live in the moment, or we lived in the moment. We don't live in the future. It's very difficult to convince a highly motivated athlete. And if you look at things like Goldman's dilemma, where the athlete is offered the pill and the guaranteed success, premiership, gold medal, whatever it may be, but they die 5 years later. There's a high percentage of athletes that take the pill, even though the consequences for that pill, they bring success, but they're also fatal. Now, those numbers change over time, and obviously it's a hypothetical situation, but there's no doubt about it that players live for now, and they don't live for a potential degenerative brain issue or problem, or they don't think to the family members that have got to look after this 40, 50, 60-year-old later down the track. How do you as a coach manage that?
Yeah, firstly, I think it's not just a footballer's attitude. I think it's a young person's attitude. Young people live for now. They're not thinking about how I'm going to feel in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time. They're more about what they can do right in this moment, and I think that carries on into playing. But it's definitely changed in terms of the incident at that time. The players are much likely now to stay down and recognise it than try to get up. And once you stay down now, there's a protocol. So as soon as you show any signs that you've had a concussion or you've had a head knock, there's a protocol to go through, and they're really hard. I find them for them to identify it as a Cat 1, there's not much in it. what we would call a tap on the head coming through is now genuinely a Cat 2, sometimes a Cat 1. And so I think that's the right way to go about it. And I think the players, as Dale said, who've come through the era where it was still a badge of honour to get up and keep playing and don't let your teammates down, to the point where it's at now, where it's no, you're letting your teammates down if you stay on the field. More importantly, letting yourself down. For me, I take it quite personal that I'm in a privileged position to have control or have some input on a player's well-being for a short period of time. Some of those players are going to be in my care for 1 year, 2 years, at the max 4 or 5 years, and I want to make sure they leave in as healthy a position as they came in. And there's so much life to live after footy, and it's important that we identify that. But there's also a point where we got to understand that it's a physical game, and I think that's where the grey's starting to creep in terms of collisions, impact collisions rather than head collisions. And I know, the surgeon or neurosurgeons and the doctors would love to have more impact on actual collisions. So I like where it sits at the moment. There's just a bit of a worry that it goes too far.
Yeah. How is it as a coach in the box? You see one of your star players be taken off the field for a Category 2 to be tested. They're up in arms. They think they're okay. You personally haven't seen anything. Is there a level of frustration there when that happens, or is it all just like, well, no, we're all in this together. We've got to err on the side of caution, or has it gone too far? And I'll probably open that up. Has it gone too much now on too much of a cautious approach and less an education and personal responsibility approach?
I don't think you can be too careful, can you? Given what we're starting to know, I don't think you can be too careful.
Well, I think that you perhaps can be too careful.
Really?
Yeah, on a number of issues, I think you can be too careful, because you could just remove every player from every collision after everything.
There's this huge fear. Let's cut to the chase. The reason the game's doing this is a huge fear of litigation.
Correct.
That's, to me,
massive.
So you don't think it's a player welfare issue? You think it's a lawsuit waiting to happen?
I think. Look, of course, there's an element of, you've got to look after the player, a former player, But I think at the bottom line is they're scared about the game being shut down by something like that. I mean, and I think you mentioned it in our previous chats that the game is on the edge like that. I mean, physical contact sport. I mean, I grew up watching it. I wasn't tough enough as all you guys were to play it at your level or anywhere near your level. And I grew up watching guys like, do you remember Terry Regan?
Yep.
Richard, you guys might remember him that well, but
he's crazy.
He wasn't he the character Matty John's base,
Yep.
I don't know, it might be Reg Regan.
Long hair, ripped in.
He used to play for the Raiders and the Roosters, and he'd get knocked out. It felt like, to me as a young kid, every week, and I'd be watching this guy get belted and be wobbling around and get up, and I thought, how tough is that? Like, but who's looking after that guy now? I don't know, and that, I think that's the stories you hear as a journo of players and, what they're going through now scares me. I don't know if it scares you guys, but
I think the danger is the impact that we're seeing from CTE now, from players that played in an era that is completely different to what it is now. And I think it's hard to judge the standards and the protocols that are in place now. Because those protocols are going to be seen to be effective in 10 years, 15 years' time. So that's where I think we've got to be careful. Like, we've got to give it time to see how. Otherwise, we're just going to be getting to a point where the game's too watered down, and it's not the game that it was.
I'm not saying I want it watered down.
No, I agree.
I'm worried about litigation in the game. You know what I mean? Richard, as an official, that is something that's definitely
it's a chicken and an egg. We've discovered concussion because doctors told us if you don't do something about it, we're gonna. And that's the bottom line. So it wasn't as it come across as this wonderful thing from the league. It came because medicine was saying this needs to happen. So that's happened. Then you put it into place, and you're dealing with an area that none of us have any real understanding of. So it's pointless for us to say what is and what isn't at stage. So they are always going to err on the side of being cautious, because if they don't err on the side of being cautious, litigation is going to destroy the whole game. And the first time, so what they're trying to put things in place that will, first of all, be overcautious maybe, but that will protect the player because they don't want to be in a court later on saying you didn't listen to this advice
You can see them doing
and didn't act it. And so
It's arse covering.
So probably taking care of people's health is probably not just arse covering, but I think in this particular case they've got to take in consideration what doctors are telling them, because if you start ignoring doctors, and that's who advising them now about what to do.
Well, so my issue with this is, if we actually want to protect the player, because there is no tool to diagnose a concussion at the moment. The greatest tool that we have at our disposal is honesty. So if you go to your point, Danny, and we err on the side of caution, all that happens, and studies, and I've read data on this, there's so much information out there, that athletes and players lie. Because
Of course they do.
what we see a knockout and we all go, yeah, that's a clear concussion. That person, that athlete, male or female, is going to need some time away. But it's those ones that don't actually quite end up in the knockout phase. Or, someone's off for a category 1, but they know there's a big game coming up the next week, so they lie about their symptoms. And it's your default position, Dale, you'd know.
Well, you guys are warriors. That's what you want to do. You want to get up and go again.
I saw Benny Hannant in a boxing match say his default position was, I'm okay. That's what happens. Players default to I'm okay. So yes, we've got litigation, but then we speak to JD's point about young people in general being protected from themselves. Perhaps the focus shouldn't be like, no, I'm going to stop you from playing. No, I'm going to stop you from wanting to achieve your goals. But hey guys, look, we need you to be honest, because if you're not, here's some of the ramifications. And don't go and blame the governing body, the sport, the doctors, the people that are supposed to be protecting you, because a lot of players don't want to be protected from themselves anyway.
Players are always going to lie about their condition. I mean, Sam Burgess hid in the toilet for a grand final, so he couldn't get completely. So at the end of the day, that's
what did he do?
Well, in the halftime of the grand final, when he ran into somebody's head, he was obviously he could never have played that grand final after the first minute if it had been today, and nor should he have, by the way. My point about it,
but why not?
Well, I'll tell you why not. Because you at some stage, you don't diagnose your son or wife's condition. You take them to a doctor who diagnoses and treats them. That's what you do. What we've got here is an independent person diagnosing whether they know the levels, but they are not worried about whether they're lying or not. They're worrying about they've seen the action, they saw what happened from outside, you are concussed and you have to come off and we need to test you. Now, after that, the protocols, doctors, 5 years ago, doctors would have been, it'd be like, me running down the dressing room and say, when are we going to get him back on? Now, it's nothing like that. Doctors will not, that's their erring on. They will know, no way. And trainers too. I mean, trainers, how many trainers asked the questions in the old 5 years ago and just fuck off, what we do? Now, mate, trainers are, and they'll pull them off. And it's not because of because at the end of the day, they're not going to trust exactly what the player's going to say to them for that reason.
Well, they know they're liable as well.
Correct.
So the protocols are in place, and if they don't follow them, then the lawsuit goes on their neck.
Correct.
So any trainer, any physio or doctor that's at the game, club doctors as well, like, there's no way, from my experience, that doctors are going to go against the protocols and put their own careers at risk first and foremost, and then the players' health and safety, because they're not in the game. They love it, but they're doctors. They love helping people. They don't want to send people out there. So again, players will cover it. Where does it stop though? Because for me, I watched Sam's head clash with James, and I think he's fractured his cheekbone. I don't straight away think that he's knocked out or he's concussed, because for me, he showed no signs that he was concussed, other than, oh my God, what happened to my cheekbone? You can see him clearly, no understanding what's going on.
But
I've
can I
hit my
tell you
face.
now, let's be honest. In this day and age, when he came in the concussion, he straight away blew up. It was a head clash. There's not a chance in the world today that he would have been able to, number one, play on, or number two, finish that game.
So do you think, though, in the criteria of it, though, it would have came down to, so obviously category 1, you've either stumbled or you've remained motionless on the ground. Do you think anywhere in that criteria it would have said for Sam that he's concussed based on the current criteria?
I think it would have, because they would have seen the head clash. There was a head clash. There's no question mark. It was a head clash. They would have seen the results of the head case, even though it was on the cheekbone, etc. But I don't believe that any doctor, and by the way, it was magnificent for us to win the grand final, but I don't believe any doctor would have allowed him to go back on the field.
Would you say the same for like lacerations things? So guys who get nicked here and they got blood, it's obviously a collision, a head collision, but I mean...
Well, that's it. But again, though, it's an outside person's assessment. Is it a cut that's just not, or is he actually really, it's a bad wound and a bad headlock, he shouldn't go back on until we're sure. That's what I'm saying. They will make the decision based on that they're sure. Not that they're sure that he should come off, but sure that he shouldn't stay on. And that sounds the same thing. But what I'm trying to say is they will override anything to make sure they're covered. Because it's right, mate, the litigation's massive if they don't.
But James is involved in the same collision.
Yeah.
To the head.
But they would have brought him off too.
And showed no symptoms.
But they would have brought him off too, though.
But on the current protocols, it showed no signs. There was no signs in that.
It's not a matter whether there's no signs or not. You're not an expert.
But it
on
is.
head
It's the protocols.
But you're not an expert on head knocks or otherwise. The person sitting in the stand who saw the head clash, which we didn't have independence. We didn't have independent doctors until 18 months ago.
But the experts have come up with the protocols.
Yeah, I know. But what I'm saying is, there's no way after that head. In my opinion, if you watch the game today. And you see it every week, after a head knock like that they wouldn't pulled him off to assess him.
How were you after that?
I was fine. But I tell you what.
Not KO'd, nothing.
If there was an independent doctor that or the Souths trainer and the Bulldogs trainer came on and asked me and Sam to leave that field, we'd still be there at Stadium Australia now.
Yeah, for sure.
We're saying we're not coming off. And we'd have our stake in the ground. So absolutely no way. I'm not
But
being...
also under those rules...
I know.
My point's not then. My point's
James, that's
now.
like one of the rules. Like, you know how they say, like a concussed person would do that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing it. Like, that would be like... Because we've sort of been told, like, through our education, like, don't say we're not coming off, I'm not doing this, don't push me away, because that's a sign that, all right, a bit of aggression, like, you're coming off. So that was probably, if the trainer's asking you, that's probably going to make them more inclined to bring you on under those rules.
Yeah. So, again, like, how we actually tackle this issue properly, I think instead of that overreach and perhaps too much from the doctors, the education to the player to take personal responsibility, and perhaps for the coaches as well to be on board with this message. Because, Richo, the doctors, go back to my playing days, I'm sure Dale will agree, and JD yourself as well. You could have had the leader neuroscientist, neurosurgeon in the room from the globe, in the room of the Dogs, the Dragons, or the St. Helens or England dressing room. I wouldn't have cared what they had to say. But if it came from a coach, I'd listen to them. And perhaps a messaging, again, I often think about, and I've actually read a little bit about how they changed the attitude to smoking. So they knew smoking was bad for you in terms of like the long-term side effects of smoking in 20, 30, 40 years' time. It didn't have an impact. But what they did to get the youth to stop smoking, they said they changed the advertising and said, look what it does to your teeth.
Yeah, now that vapes,
But they said, look, but before vapes were invented, they attacked the immediate reaction. So what immediately happens if you smoke? Your fingers go yellow. Look at this. You're a hot girl, a good-looking bloke. You got yellow fingers and black teeth. And then young people went, I don't want to do that. So maybe with concussion, the focus shouldn't be, here's what could happen to you in 10, 20, 30 years' time. Here's the immediate impact it happens to your team's performance right now. And maybe that would change the player's attitude of like, hang on, if I'm concussed, I'm detrimental to the cause.
But what stops litigation for smokers now? So if I'm a smoker, because I still sell cigarettes.
Yeah.
If I'm a smoker and I get cancer,
the warning
signs.
So
the pictures of.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, you take personal responsibility.
You take personal responsibility, and is that not our right to take personal responsibility to play rugby league?
That brings up
we understand that there's head collisions.
There's an element of risk. There's a danger. When I step on that field, this could happen, and there could be catastrophic injury in the moment. But there's also an understanding that this might catch up with you later down the track.
You sign the waiver. Do you do that? That's an old idea, but do you sign the waiver and say, I cop it. You are exonerated from all future issues I may have with my head. I know what I'm getting into when I sign my first contract.
I don't think so. I think, like I'm saying, that not everybody buys a pack of cigarettes signs a waiver to say that if they smoke, they're not they can't see. The fact is they've been told that this is a potential risk, and you by signing up to play, when you sign your contract for registration, that's part of the risk that you take. I'm still on board massively with making sure that the players' health and well-being. The protocols are awesome. Absolutely love it and I'm all for it. Just where does it end though? Like there's still no categorical evidence that head knock collisions alone cause CTE.
That's right.
Alone. Now, there's a huge correlation between alcohol and drug abuse, which through the years that a lot of our players are suffering from was a huge problem in our game. So until they can tell me definitely that this area has definitely led to CTE and the drinking and drug abuse has had no bearing on it, it's so much grey in terms of litigation.
I guess the other grey area as well is like to your point there, JD, as well, like how long, like we used to be a 6-day return to play protocol. Now we're 11 days return to play. Like given the limited knowledge that we have on concussion and CTE, who's to say that is the magic number for us?
Well, the neurologist would suggest a 30-day standout. But unfortunately, with a 30-day standout, is what you're going to get is more lying. So it's a fine balance.
But we're tempering it now. Because we're saying it's 30. All they're trying to do is put in place protocols that when it comes to a situation of litigation or otherwise, that they put whatever they could put in place to mitigate this problem. And if they don't do that, then they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, it's lawyers at 10 paces with this. The doctors are giving their opinions, and but the bottom line is, though, they've got to make sure that they've been doing and be seen to overdoing it rather than underdoing it.
Yeah.
Now, 30 days is right. 30 days it probably should be, and it is in some sports.
I think definitely depending on
11 days now is a minimum it should be.
If you're an 11-day stand down and you have one within the same season, then I think it does make sense for that 11 days to be 15 days or whatever it is. But if
we're all catching up though, aren't we? This wasn't even part of our life.
No,
we're all trying to catch up, and so the medic. And if somebody told you that a doctor, I mean, how many times in the old days, the doctor, you tell her, don't you start telling me what he's going to do? He's going to be on there, right? But it doesn't happen that anyway for these reasons. So the world's changing and evolving, and this will change and evolve too. It will change and evolve.
Richard, one of the hardest stories I've had to cover was watching Boyd Cordner, and what he went like. I consider Boyd someone who I really like, and I've got on really well with him. I covered his whole career, and watching him having to quit the game early and seeing him get knocked out in an easy situation, I found that really distressing as a journalist to watch, and I found it really hard to talk to him about, like emotional, like it was. You could see the pain it was causing him, and the doubt that was in his head, and the concern that he wouldn't let out because he was such a tough guy. But you could just tell it was eating away at him. And I don't know. I haven't been through those testing procedures. You guys, do you worry about when you go into these situations where you're being tested, and do you get nervous? Do you what's the emotion?
With the protocols, like the tests? Do you mean
afterwards? Like when you've been knocked out, you've got to go for tests, and they're saying, well, you've had too many concussions, or you've had you're a risk, or do you worry about that?
I think my perception has changed over the course of my career. Like to James's point earlier about wearing it as a badge of honour and sort of not being honest with your symptoms. I think I was doing that early in my career. Like if it was a bit of a slight headache where it would put you back to day one of your protocols, where you'd have to go back and cycle on a bike as opposed to being able to do contact on day 5. I definitely wasn't honest early days in my career. But now, I don't know what it is that changed me, whether it's I'm a bit older and now I realise the potential effects that it can have later. Obviously, you got a young family as well. Like I feel like those things now impact my decision to want to look after myself and want to be, sane of mind, when I'm
Is it hard when
60s?
people like me, like in my position, grill you about it? Like we constantly, like Dale, you've had a number of do you get defensive?
Oh,
do you get
not
offended?
myself. Like my wife's the biggest, in terms of the head knocks and collisions, I guess, that I've had over the course of my career. It more so irks her, I guess, the fact that those sorts of things. I'm happy to talk about different things and, protocols, but it's probably more so my family that think about it and are more concerned than what I am.
Yeah, I think at different stages in your career, you have a different approach as well. And, like everybody in life, when you have young children, that changes your outlook. It no longer becomes about you. That certainly changes things. I think the number of concussions and head knock you have, there is more education and awareness out there about, obviously, the more you have, the greater the risk into the future, and you start to assess the game and look at different situations. And go, maybe I'm not gonna do that. Maybe I'm not gonna go back for the kick-off. I'll give that to someone else. But then, as a teammate, you think, well, I'm putting
somebody else.
Like I'm putting someone else in that risky situation now. Maybe I need to burden that responsibility.
I think the thing that's given me a little bit of confidence sort of post-career is, and I think you've spoken about it in previous podcasts, James, where you get head scans. So I think I've had a number of head scans over the course of my career. So I think 2017 I had one more recently, just to sort of see if there's like a baseline for the future where, okay, at 25, this is what my brain looked like. At 30, this is what it looked like. I'll get it 5 years post-career, and at least then I can see if it stayed the same.
Yeah,
and if it doesn't help me, it's going to help the next generation of people that come through.
Does it go, like when you're out, do you think about this? I mean, is that something that you consider as a professional athlete?
On my mind, sort of.
Yeah,
No, I wouldn't say that it's something that I think about, day to day or throughout the week. It's, obviously if something happens, you have to come off the field. It's obviously disappointing at times, particularly when you know that you don't have a concussion. That's probably when it's most frustrating, when it appears that you might have been a category 2, but you know yourself that you're fine, honestly within yourself that you're fine. That's where I feel like the frustration comes out, where you should still be on the field and you're going to have your 15 minutes, you're going to go inside, you're going to say your apple, elbow, carpet, saddle, bubble, finger, penny, blanket, sandwich.
Well, Dale,
you're going to say all your words.
Dale,
you know what I mean?
This is where, and people might disagree with this, I don't think the testing is adequate at the moment. And I've spoken. Of course, the fact that Dale can say elbow, apple, carpet, saddle, bubble, yes, you can. So some of the words that you're going to ask to be repeated anyway. You also know that when you have your baseline, it's not uncommon to see players tank because they know that they need to get that baseline in order to be cleared to play. So why would you want your baseline at its optimum?
Yeah, so
because I'm thinking 2 steps ahead.
Yeah. So after young blokes come in and smash the baseline.
Yeah, like yeah.
Geez, you killed it, mate. Well
Time to play.
But this is again where it comes back to that honesty piece, and until that the technology has been developed that can actively diagnose a concussion through a saliva, a blood sample, whatever it may be, because it doesn't exist at the moment. It's still going to rely on the truth telling. Now, should we structure a game to limit the amount? Like, it's that fine balance of do you completely throw the baby out with the bathwater and construct a game that is purely about limiting the amount of head knocks? Like, no, I don't think you can.
I feel like that's what they're trying to do, no?
But everything comes with an element of risk. So even take, for example, the introduction of the e-scooter into any metropolitan major city centre. So that's good for the environment, right? Because less cars. Well, head trauma, brain injury, concussion have all gone up. It's a direct correlation. You can see that. Speak to anybody who works at A&E. The amount of accidents to the head that those e-scooters cause is sent it through the roof. But they're good for society, right? So rugby league is good for society, in my opinion, but it also comes at a bit of a cost. And there's a price to pay. So how much are there any rule changes that we can bring in to limit the number of head knocks, but also not compromise this game that we as alpha males, highly, very testosterone-filled young boys and now young girls love to play? Like, is there anything that we can do? I think back to that Magic Round 2021. And like, do we go all in but have the messaging better?
Well, guys like you would know this far better than me, but the criticism is that to try and encourage the low tackle is maybe risking more head knocks. Is that
with
right
all
or
due
not?
respect, it's rubbish.
Right.
Like, there's so many low tackles. You spoke about Boyd Cordner before, and I think of Boyd Cordner. I think most of his collisions come from, just off the top of my head watching him, from when he dips to hit low.
Or like hitting someone's hip. Or
it gets a hip.
That's what I'm saying. But they're saying don't tackle high, right?
Yeah, but
that which encourages
the
low tackle.
the tackler becomes more more vulnerable to a concussion as opposed to the ball carrier.
That's what's been said. Like, that's the line of thought that's been put to me, that the low tackle's worse.
Yeah, well, they both have risk because we're running. People are running and they're not running in a dead straight line, so they're going to change angles. And when you're changing angles and you're coming in a collision, it's like driving two cars in a tight grid and giving them opportunity to change lanes. Like there's going to be a collision somewhere. It can't be perfect all the time. We've got to do more, I think. Again, I think the protocols are in place are great. I think we need to give it time to see and make sure that the protocols are having the effect they have. And like young players now, they are so aware of concussions. You know, we don't do drills at training now. We make sure that there's a real process on making sure they'll enter and tackles properly. We're not doing as many collisions as we used to. So we are adjusting the way we train, the way we prepare. But it's a grey area because if you don't do enough, then you're not preparing your players for what comes on the weekend. And if they're not prepared, they're on a higher risk of getting injured.
Well, I'll come back to you on that point, JD. But okay, we'll talk about restructuring the game, rule changes. One thing that would eliminate the potential for a head knock happening is the kickoff.
Eliminate the kickoff.
Eliminate the kickoff.
Well,
like if you actually if you had at the top of the pedestal the utmost priority to limit the risk the athlete takes for a concussion, you would remove the kickoff.
What would you have in its place?
Well, that would be open to interpret. That would be open to suggestion. But you would, because that's the greatest amount of distance away from one another, which generally what tends to suggest it produces the highest impact.
Was that the
and the
purpose
greatest
behind
danger.
the NFL? The bounce up.
Yeah. Well, it could.
That's where
you
it
know
gets
what?
to, isn't it? Like just bounce it up and there's no collision. Then we just get
So
on with
is
it.
that the purpose? You know, the NFL, how they've got the spotting. So if the ball is kicked inside that 25-yard line, you know, encouraging shorter kickoffs to deter that collision. Like, I think could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the purpose to deter that collision that they have. So it's not a 50-metre collision, so it's a 20, 25-metre collision. So whether that's something you look at implementing.
Think about the spectacle.
Well,
you rock up to the game. You're building the game. You're walking through the stands. The players are starting to warm up. You're starting to get excited about the kickoff. Your players come out for kickoff. You're pumped. There's a kickoff. That energy.
Yeah.
When they're hunting, and even as a player, when you're hunting off that kickoff, maybe not the bloke who's carrying it off the kickoff, but both sides, this is it. We're on here.
That's what you love so much about the origin, isn't it? Like, honestly, like when you think, who's kicking off and who's receiving?
Yeah,
you look at who the two front rowers are, and you go, I get teams thinking about who's going to be the first to have that contact. And that's, as you say, as a spectacle, that's what people want to see. So I don't think you can take that part
but
away
then
from it.
If everybody's so invested in removing concussion and collision out of the game, then you would remove the kickoff.
How many
that's
how many
one
concussions have come from that?
Two tackles.
How many concussions?
Oh, hang on, actually, tries there's more kickoffs.
I reckon if you were to look at if you were to analyse it, you'd see the number would be disproportionate to any other
first set
tackle.
of the game is generally where you get the worst because that's where everybody's at their freshest and running hardest. Line speed's harder.
Yeah.
So I think the first set of the game, but it's a
that's it. That's it. So how much do we hold on to this? But then, if you had a neuroscientist in here, they'd be saying, "Get rid of it. I don't care."
Well, just stop neuroscientists watching rugby league. Seriously, like if they don't like it, don't watch it.
But they'd say, "Well, we care for the patient."
Well, why don't we stop driving motor cars?
Well, again, this
riding
comes
motorbikes?
This comes to my point.
Like,
the elements of risk. You don't have your scooters in the city.
No.
You don't have your e-scooters. I'd be happy to get rid of them. By the way,
Not the train stations anyway.
But you knew when I was young coming up, like if you had a neck injury, it used to be neck injuries. Like if you went and saw a surgeon, a specialist in spinal injuries, mate, they were just, no, you can't play anymore. They couldn't wait to stop you from playing footy because they didn't like the contact sports. Surgeons, they treat people with severe injuries, so they're not going to have a positive outlook on collision sports. But what does the game do for society? And at the end of the day, what are we going to do if we stop collision? Take collision sport out of Australian sport. And what is left?
Yeah, not much. Well again,
left?
And thankfully we are all different. We all have different opinions. We're wired up differently. I know playing next to Dale, I knew he was wired differently to some others. And again, if there was a neurosurgeon or neuroscientist, neuropsychological, whatever you want to call it, in the room, they're wired up and view the world very, very differently to how we would approach 100%. It and our appetite for risk. And, we privilege the present over the future, and that's something that I did.
Probably why there's no neurosurgeons that playing the game at the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They've made an individual choice about what we're going to do with their lives and careers.
I think that there are some rule changes that and some protocols. The awareness and education for me is the big thing.
Agreed.
And that personal responsibility. Have some people that are out there to protect the very persons from themselves. One of the things, JD, you mentioned there about what we do in practice and in training. So in the NFL, they adopted a model. It came from the NFL Players Association into their CBA to tightly police and limit the amount of contact and collision in training. Is that something that you, and as well, I must admit that they did have opposition, and there were certain coaches that said, no, it's going to ruin it. Players aren't going to be able to tackle. They're going to be missing tackles. It's going to lead to more concussions. Is that something that you would support if it was mandated across all 17 teams?
It depends on the level of the input they're having, like to say we're not going to do collisions only one day a week or whatever it is. If it goes ridiculous, then you're not going to support it. If it makes sense, then probably are. But like I said before, that once you get in season, you're not doing a whole lot of collisions at training. You're doing maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes of live footy. The rest is all controlled. It's all done in an environment where you're getting your learnings from it. Because, we can't belt each other all week at high-level collisions and then turn up on Friday or Saturday and still have the energy we need to play at the level we have to. So we know that we can't do that from a physical standpoint. So, again, I don't think that's something we need to fix. I think it's very rare for a player to get a head knock in training. I actually found it a lot more common when I was playing than it is now. I find it quite rare for players to get head knocks in training.
Just on that point, I know that it does happen, and the only one that I can recall a player being stood down is Viliami Kickout for the Bulldogs this season. Now, if throughout the whole 17 teams in the NRL, if only one player got concussed in training, I give up because I know it happened more than once. So I just wonder how much that culture is.
I think that's where it's coming to as well, where they're going to have full-time doctors
at training.
But
then again, does it come down to that honesty piece?
Well, it's going to come down to player honesty, of course, but you're never going to solve that. If a player can get up and show no signs of concussion, then what are you going to do? Say you got concussion? Like, you've got to take some honesty in it. And again, we talked about it before about the difference from the start of your career to the end of your career. It's just a natural evolution as a player. As you get towards the back end of your career, you start thinking about life after footy, and that's going to. But at the start of your career, you're not. It's like people say to you, need to save your money when you're 20-year-old. No, I don't. No, I need to enjoy it. When I'm getting to 40, I'm start thinking, I need to start putting some money away here. Cause
you guys talk about the honesty, right? If you go the other way, I mean, a team's cheating, like in terms of on the field, you see a prop suddenly get a concussion in the 23rd minute to get taken off the field and gets his test. That to me as a journo, I'm watching it going, that's a good time.
And as a pundit, you'd sort of have a, you can see why it would be questioned, and fans would be quite,
I'm not going to say what I think, but look, I do. Again, at the same time, like, players don't want to come off. Like, they don't it's if they said to you, mate, I want you the 25th minute just to act like you got a bump on the head because you've still got to pass the protocols. Like, okay, come off. There's still a risk that you don't pass the protocols.
Even if there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. Well, you still got to remember the words.
You might forget.
You know them pretty well.
The backwards letters.
But we know now as well. Like, you get I'll use Blake Taff as an example. We go into the last game. We need to win. And as soon as he makes that collision in the box, we know straight away Blake Taff is gone for the game. And he actually passes the protocols right up until the last second, because the protocols, they stretch them out. So it's not like just a couple of questions and then you remember the words. They'll keep going for a period of time and then making you walk and doing all different things. And it was right at the end where they were saying he's going to, and I didn't even listen to him. I said, he ain't coming back on. There's no way.
Look, we've talked a lot, and I think the attitude is changing. I look back to Joseph Sualihi, who put his own hand up for the Roosters against Cronulla in a playoff game and said, I can't, I'm concussed. Nobody spotted it. Nobody saw it. There was no protocol, no Cat 1, Cat 2. At half-time, he just put his hand up. So I think we are changing. I do think, JD, come back to that, the collisions in training. There are a number of experts that say it's not necessarily now the concussions, it's just the number of collisions that athletes are exposed to that lead to degenerative brain issues later down the track. So we just need to reduce them as much as possible.
James, are you talking about just body collisions?
Yes, any sort of tackle, any collision.
Wow.
The knock-on effect, the total calculations of thousands of collisions across a career. It doesn't necessarily. You don't need to be concussed. It's just number of collisions exposed. Like the soccer players with the heading the ball, they're not concussed when they head the ball, but it's just that constant repetition. So one of the calls is that we follow America's lead with the NFL and tightly police and limit the amount of contact in training. And I know what the coach's psyche is of always wanting to get competitive advantage. But if you're all in the same playing field, I think that would be fair.
Again, I think the NFL have suffered litigation. They've done a lot of things wrong that we were fortunate to learn from as well and make sure we get ahead of. But so they're probably going well and truly on the other side. But let's remember they play a collision sport, one collision at a time, and a rest. There's no conditioning. There's no repeated effort on effort, and fatigue. So if we're not getting that fatigue through the collisions in training, then how are we going to be prepared for that in a game? It's a completely different game. It's a one effort, walk, reset. There's no fatigue in NFL, none whatsoever.
It's different.
That's the difference in the game, and that's all I'm saying. As a game, we've got to look at what impacts our game, not just what. How are we getting this information? I know we're saying there's people that are coming in and they're having issues later in life, and we're looking at them, but are we brain scanning every player who's healthy, and are we comparing them to health? Like you just said, you've had a couple of scans and it's showing that there's no issue. So unless we get a wider base of testing for even healthy brains, how do we know exactly what the effort is? Because we're only looking at the bad ones at the moment. I think we need to widen before we start making more decisions, we need to widen our testing and get more information.
Well, one of the things I did speak about was potential rule changes or how the referees referee the game or not the rules. The Magic Round, Danny, you as a person in the media, what was your thoughts on that particular day, and should we have continued it on?
It just felt like the world had gone crazy, didn't it? Like the rugby league world had suddenly gone bonkers. Like what was going on? Like I don't know if you were warned about it or if you were told this was going.
We were warned on Friday afternoon at 12 o'clock. Everyone got an email.
Yeah,
I mean, ridiculous. Maybe Thursday night. I don't know, but it was like a last minute email went out saying
how do
we're
you
going to crack
change
down.
that? How do you alter everything mid-year or early in the year when you've trained a number of years and number of off seasons, your most recent off season, without that knowledge that was going to happen? That to me it felt knee-jerky and unplanned. That was my reaction.
Yeah, I think again the messaging around it, like if the NRL were to come in and have the same level of refereeing for the start of the season and to drill the messages to the teams November 1, and their messaging was clear, and the referees would go to practice sessions and say, look guys, this is going to result in 10 minutes. We need to clamp down. We need to show. We need to penalise any form of foul play that interferes with the head. I think that will give you enough time to adapt and also accept, because there seemed on that particular day or that particular weekend the confusion of the player, the coach, the fans,
no one knew what was going
the punditry.
on.
Nobody knew. I felt actually quite sorry for the referees at that time.
Well, that round sort of was very much an outlier compared to the rest of the season. Like, do you remember when they were policing the foot on the ball? So putting the ball down and putting a foot on the ball, and there'd be a penalty to the opposing team. Like there was a round, I think it was in pre-season, where there was honestly, we played a game against Newcastle and there was 7 penalties in the first half for not putting your foot on the ball. I feel like that was a similar incident where I think there was 13, penalties for high tackles or sin beating, and I feel like it sort of went away. Obviously, it's still policed more now than what it was, say, 10 years ago, but I guess the consistency, they sort of made a point of it that round, and then the consistency of it dropped off. So that's probably...
I think really, though, refereeing, we'll get on to that later on, but the reason that happened is because referees are being assessed and they'll come out that week and say, this is what you've got to do. So they would rather overcompensate by penalising than having to put it into a thing where they come up afterwards and say, well, this is right or wrong. So they're overcompensating. So that's the administration's fault, because my opinion is that referees should referee. You let them do what they want to. You tell them what's right. You tell them about the game. But at the end of the day, that is purely an administration from the NRL saying you must do this now. And they don't want to go against it. And then it made it look like dickheads. Let's be brutally honest. They look like a complete joke, the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, because what they did, they handed it back to the referees. We know we've got to make sure about these things. We know, but referee like you're going to referee.
But again, was that the reaction to this fear of litigation? We've got to be shown we're serious. But again, like the timing and who delivers the message, like clubs receiving an email probably wasn't good enough. It needed to be done November 1. Everyone's back in pre-season. It's out there. The fans, bring everybody, because again, the honesty and the education on this, all the stakeholders need to come on this journey.
Definitely.
Like we need to treat it seriously. We all need to be aware of some of the potential ramifications, and bring everyone on the journey. And I know Rugby Union, they brought in some tackle at the waist and below in any level below the professional in Europe. And there was a big outcry, so they changed it to the nipple, and that's sort of working. But I think if the NRL are going to be serious about this, they need to, or whatever rule changes are made, they need to bring everybody on board.
But James, you look at the difference between that Magic round and then a game a couple of years later on the same ground, that third Origin, which was just the most high collision, brutal game I can remember forever. We loved that game, didn't we? And that is a million miles away from what they were trying to do at Magic Round. So has it worked? I don't know.
But what happened in that game, though?
Knockouts.
Yeah, but
I know there was not many from foul play.
They didn't come back on the field.
Yeah, there weren't many from foul play. It was mainly accidental.
And I think
that was brutal still. So we still can have that brutality.
I think it's back where it was now anyway, where it was.
Yeah, it pretty much is. But it pretty much is
like
back
if you
to
hit
where
someone
it was.
high now, you go into the bin. It's next to guaranteed. As soon as you hit someone in the head, especially if you hit him with your shoulder. It happened. Tom Burgess, high collision with the young fella front rower from Cronulla.
It didn't happen for Harry Grant in the semi, did it?
Yeah, but that's different. That's a tap with an arm. We're talking about big collisions where Tom's responsibility is to lower his centre. We've had these discussions with Tom, and he's like, "Mate, we're both big men." I said, "Yeah, but." Then it's the way the game is now, it's your responsibility to lower your centre. And if you don't lower your centre, you're at risk of going off. And he misses, 2 or 3 games, I think, got at the end of the season, or 2 games.
Well, again, I think if it's like that, anytime interpretations of the laws of the game are changed, what coaches do is they get a competitive advantage. Those that act first get the competitive advantage. So you get, listen, guys, like we're all on board for this. There's no point trying to fight it. We can actually use this to our advantage because though the opposition, if they're not going to act, if they're going to keep doing, they'll go down to 12 or 11 and we'll keep 13 and then therefore we win.
We've got a crew back today of young players and trainer trialists, and the first meeting discussion we have in the morning is about our footwork in a collision. I put the question to them, why is it important? I say you're getting power and all the technical things you expect to play. And I said, what else is important about it? Yeah, stop you getting concussioned. Well, why don't you want to get concussed? Well, it's, obviously long-term damage or making sure that we're looking after ourselves, and what else happens? You don't get to play the game anymore. So you
don't get penalised.
You don't get penalised, So, but again, Tom's a 30-year-old front rower who's been playing this way. Like, a few years ago, everyone's going, what a hit.
Yeah.
Hazelton drops the ball, we get the ball, we're on the attack.
The game's evolving, isn't it? We brought in 2 things into the game, which you've got to let's give credit where it's due too.
Yeah.
Taking the shoulder charge out of the game, you talk about head knock. It's not just a head knock, it's the whiplash from a shoulder charge. So the changing of the game. The second thing which people have forgotten all about now There's no doubt in my mind that a lot more neck injuries and head injuries were done through the wrestle than through anything else in the game. When you've got people teaching you jiu-jitsu to hold you on the ground in a place where you can't move your neck or otherwise, that is the most dangerous thing in the game, in my opinion, and it's changed. So we are evolving with these things which will make a difference in the rules of the game, but we've just got to make sure that we don't go too far with them. But I don't think the game is as brutal and as tough as it ever was. Yeah. There was nothing tough about hitting somebody with an elbow in the head. No. There was nothing tough about a swinging arm. Fucking running the ball up from the dead ball line and getting belted, that's tough in a fair dinkum tackle. So I think that we're making the changes, and I think we're getting better and better at it. And I think the referees, and we'll get onto that in a minute, I think, as always, for 30 years in the game, the most maligned creatures in the game, because you can't play them without them. And I've got to say, they are more sensible than the administrators, far more sensible, more down to earth.
Yeah, well, this is an area and topic of personal interest. It's something that's going to keep on evolving. I really excited about what's happening in the future in some of the labs where we can actually definitively diagnose a concussion, and there is less need for honesty from the player, because I understand the dilemma that they're in when you speak to that issue with Sam Burgess, like the dilemma that he would be in when and we often point to those extreme examples. Okay, well, what if this? Well, what happens if a player is about to play in a grand final and it's their last ever game? Or they've been dreaming of this since a kid? Like, can you take that away from them? Can a neuroscientist take that away from them? And they've got to be honest about it. Maybe the culture will change where that decision is completely taken out of their hands. I guess we'll see. But like each and every episode, if there's something you'd like to keep or take away, Richard, I'll come to you. Okay, I'll go to Dale. I'll go to Dale first. Is there anything you'd like to see kept in or change in this?
Oh, it's so hard. Like I think purely around this topic of concussion, because there's so much unknown. Like I said, like in terms of the number, like nobody likes to miss games. So I don't know. Keep it at 11 days protocol.
Okay. JD?
Yeah, I'm happy to keep the protocols. Like I said before, I think let the protocols do their job for a while before we keep changing them, and stop talking to neuroscientists, surgeons, or what we call them, but also keep the integrity of the game. And I'm sitting here talking about rugby league, absolutely blessed to have this journey in this game, and the last thing I want to do is stop players or young men having this, or young women as well now, having this opportunity to be influenced by this great game. And I really hope that, the people that are making these decisions keep that at the forefront of their mind.
Keep the kickoffs, James.
Even if it comes at the expense of...
I just think, I know it's not ideal, but as a fan of the game, I love to see it. Sorry.
You know what else with the kickoffs? It makes rugby league one of the few sports that exist that you want to see the beginning of the game. So if you look at things like test matches, like in cricket, NFL, baseball, even soccer, rugby union, like AFL, rugby league is the one game that I think the TV broadcasters, which obviously contribute a lot to our sport, it's like you are glued in from moment one.
100.
And again, we take that away, it comes at a cost.
Rule changes have created the integrity of the game, and everybody makes them for that reason. So I think that it'll evolve. I think what we're doing now is only the baseline of what's going to happen with concussion over the next few years, and it's the minimum standards at the moment. And I believe they'll get more. I really do.
All right, brilliant.
But I'm not saying whether I like it and changing the fabric game. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, as an administrator, I can assure you that will become more and more involved, not less and less.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're going to take a quick break from this podcast to talk to you about AG1. Now, this is a product I've been taking for over a year now, and I absolutely love it. It gives me all of my daily nutritional needs in one easy drink. All you have to do is put in 1 scoop of AG1 into a nice cold glass of water, and you are set for the rest of the day. The cupboard has been cleaned out of tablets and powders because all my needs are met by AG1. The power of routine cannot be underestimated, and we all know how small habits lead to big wins. Some of those big wins for me have included better gut health. My clarity, especially in the afternoon, has improved so much. Gone has the mid-afternoon slump. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement. Now, as humans, we all share that same basic foundational needs. That's where AG1 take care of everything. This supports your body's needs like nutrient replenishment, gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. AG1 is the supplement I trust to provide the support my body needs daily. And that's why they've been a partner and I've been a user for so long. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1, a buy-round exclusive. If you try AG1, you get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/buy-round. That's drinkag1.com/buy-round for our exclusive Australia-wide offer. Check it out.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to that episode of The Roundtable. We have no Tui's mailbag this week because next week is a massive fan episode of The Roundtable. We want all your questions, everything that we've missed. You can go back to the first episode, and if you've got a question from that, if there's a topic we haven't covered on The Roundtable you'd like us to discuss, please jump in the comments, message us on Instagram, message us on TikTok, email us at thebuyround@gmail.com. However you want to get in touch, we'll make sure we get to as many questions as possible. But thanks so much for Tui's for being part of the show. We love you. The Buy Round brought to you by Tui's. How do you feel? I feel like a Tui's all two. We'll catch you next week.